I gush to you about what an important movie Brokeback Mountain was to me, and it is still, I think, in my top.
It has been 20 years since two cowboys, Jack Twist and Ennis Del Mar, met on the vast plains of Wyoming and carved out one of the most enduring love stories in film history. Ang Lee's Brokeback Mountain, released in 2005, took Annie Proulx's short story and gave it a raw, aching life on screen with Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger in roles that redefined their careers. 2 decades later, its legacy still stands tall, but hidden behind the acclaim are unusual stories and little-known facts that may surprise even the most devoted fans. Here are 20 weird facts about Brokeback Mountain you might not know. Number 20. South Park Prophecy. The long-running animated series, South Park has often been said to show the future ahead of its time, and one of the strongest examples comes from 1998. In that year, during Season 2, Episode 9, titled Chef's Chocolate Salty Balls, the show presented a scene that closely resembled the story of Brokeback Mountain. The film itself did not come out until 2005, yet the South Park episode displayed a version of the same idea many years earlier. In that episode, Robert Redford decides to move the Sundance Film Festival to South Park, Colorado. The story follows the people of the town as they attempt to cope with the influx of Hollywood visitors, with some seeking to capitalize on the sudden surge in tourism. The program frequently parodied films, and this episode targeted film festivals and the types of movies often showcased there. The boys attend several screenings where they encounter exaggerated versions of independent films. Among them was a fictional story about two cowboys who eat pudding together before choosing to explore their sexuality. At the time, it appeared to be one more parody, but when Brokeback Mountain was released several years later, the earlier South Park episode seemed almost predictive. While the similarities are strong, the timing shows another layer. The episode aired 7 years before the release of Brokeback Mountain, but it came out 1 year after the short story by Annie Proulx was published. Not long after that story appeared, work had already begun on adapting it into a film, meaning that news of the project was already circulating when the South Park episode was produced. Although never confirmed, it is possible that Trey Parker and Matt Stone heard of the idea while attending Sundance in the 1990s and chose to parody it early. When asked by the Associated Press about being able to predict the future, Stone joked in an offhand way, saying they were not prophets, but that Cartman was, adding that the festival atmosphere at the time was already leaning toward such stories. Long-running series such as South Park and The Simpsons often gain a reputation for predicting events simply because of how many episodes they create. With more than 300 episodes produced, some jokes and storylines will likely align with later events. Often, only the parts that match are remembered, while other details are overlooked. This gives the appearance of prediction when, in fact, it may be a coincidence. For that reason, Chef's Chocolate Salty Balls may not truly stand as an example of South Park foretelling the future. The story behind Brokeback Mountain had been available since 1997, and a writer may have absorbed its premise, even without conscious intent, before using it in parody. The exact source of the idea may never be known, but the connection between the South Park episode and Brokeback Mountain remains part of the history of both works. Number 19. Fictional Mountain. The story is set in Riverton, a real town located in the Bighorn Mountains of central Wyoming. In reality, Riverton is larger and more prosperous than the version shown on screen. Along with Wyoming, parts of the story are also set in Texas. However, the filming itself was primarily carried out in the Canadian Rockies of Alberta. Much of the shooting took place around the same areas that Christopher Nolan later used for his science fiction film Interstellar. There is, however, no actual place called Brokeback Mountain. The name was created by the author Annie Proulx. The sweeping mountain scenery used in the film came from the Kananaskis Range near Canmore. This is located along the Trans-Canada Highway, southeast of Banff, and approximately 60 miles west of Calgary. The same area had been used earlier in films such as the 1942 Betty Grable musical Springtime in the Rockies and the 1954 melodrama River of No Return. which starred Marilyn Monroe and Robert Mitchum. Some of the peaks featured in the film include Wind Tower and Three Sisters near Canmore, Moose Mountain to the east, and Fortress to the south. For those who wish to see how the film was put together in detail, a dedicated site called Finding Brokeback.com provides a breakdown of nearly every location used. Number 18. Heath Ledger, Nearly Broke. Jake Gyllenhaal's nose during Brokeback Mountain's kissing scene. It's no secret how passionate Brokeback Mountain's more intimate scenes are, but according to Gyllenhaal, the scenes were so passionate that he got a little too roughed up. Gyllenhaal described how the scene was filmed. Ledger grabbed him and slammed him against the wall before kissing him. Gyllenhaal then did the same, pulling Ledger and slamming him back against the wall before kissing him. The two repeated this movement take after take, and in the process, Gyllenhaal said he ended up feeling as if he had been badly beaten. This detail about the filming was shared in an interview where Gyllenhaal explained the physicality behind the performances and how the repeated takes left a clear impact on him. Number 17. The mystery of the opening scene. The first images of the film immediately give a sense of who Ennis, played by Heath Ledger, is. The camera lingers on wide stretches of land, showing nothing but empty space with Ennis standing in it. There are no other people around, only he is there. The way he is dressed, the way he holds himself, and the setting itself mark him as part of the cowboy image. At the same time, these choices stress how alone he is, as though the world is vast and empty and he has no place in it. The look of Ennis against these sweeping spaces makes it clear that his life is marked by separation and silence. At the same time, there is the surface of toughness, the cowboy role he has to play. Ennis is portrayed as the more tragic of the two men due to the weight of his past, his financial struggles, and his inability to overcome the limitations of his own sense of manhood. In the frame, he looks small, pressed against the space around him, which adds to the sense of pain in his life. His way of holding his body deepens this impression. It is as if he pulls himself inward, shrinking physically, a movement that reveals his inner state without words. Ledger's acting gives this shape with remarkable care, and the performance makes his loss all the more clear. His face is hidden under his hat, his head bent down, which adds another layer to what is seen in these moments. He is not placed in the center of the screen. Instead, the shot has him off to the side, leaning against the wall of the trailer office. His clothes blend into the dull tones of his setting, making him almost fade into the background. It is as if he is trying to avoid attention, to pass unseen, to blend into whatever is around him. The silence of these opening moments only makes this stronger, as the quiet underscores his distance from the world. When Jack, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, arrives, he tries to talk, but Ennis lowers his head, a simple action that reveals his wish to remain apart, to retreat within himself, and keep others at bay. Even inside the trailer office, the framing shows the same pattern. Jack stands in the middle, while Ennis moves toward the edge, sliding against the wall, once again set apart from the space and the people in it. Number 16. The Mating Dance. When Ennis and Jack begin their sheep herding and camp tender work, Ang Lee places clear focus on the natural beauty around them. The vast stretches of land, the sky, and the mountains give a sense of calmness and order, while the recurring score in these scenes carries a soft and lyrical tone. The music and landscape together build an atmosphere that reflects tenderness and the quiet growth of feeling between the two men. In the same way that the open land stands as a symbol for the natural quality of their love and desire, Lee shows how two people begin to fall for each other. Their bond starts in small and ordinary ways, through daily conversations and simple tasks. The routine of camp life becomes the setting for this closeness. At times, such as the bear encounter, moments break from the ordinary, yet even those play a role in shaping trust and connection. Over time, these shared experiences bring Ennis and Jack nearer to one another, until there is enough trust for Ennis to open up to Jack. That moment allows the path toward deeper intimacy to unfold. There is another point that Lee builds carefully. For the audience to understand these men and their choices, it is essential first to see them as ordinary, relatable individuals. By placing attention on their tasks and their human interactions, Lee makes them familiar to the viewer. This is especially needed for those in the audience who find it challenging to accept same-gender relationships, particularly between men. Through this approach, Lee gives the viewer a way to connect with Ennis and Jack before the deeper elements of their relationship unfold. Number 15. First aggressive love-making. Ennis and Jack's first sexual encounter carries an almost violent quality, as though even in a moment of intimacy, they must remain guarded and present themselves as nothing other than hypermasculine. Ennis in particular is careful to conceal and suppress his attraction to men, and this guardedness shapes the intensity of the moment. Their first forceful connection is layered with complexity because it reflects a way of being that is deeply influenced by hypermasculine conditioning. When observed closely, this moment reveals itself as a reflection of Ennis's own internal conflict. It is as if the scene places his private struggle before us in physical form. In this life-changing moment, he is torn between two forces. On one side lies the conditioning that tells him to resist what he wants, and on the other, his natural desire that longs to be freed from its burden. At first, Ennis does resist, but his impulses eventually push through, though not simply or gently. This struggle results in what can be seen as a first step. He allows himself intimacy, but only through a form that avoids tenderness or closeness. What emerges is a hypermasculine kind of intimacy that functions almost as a compromise for him. He does what he longs to do, but does so in a way that distances him from any deeper contact or emotional openness. For Ennis, this becomes a way of preserving in his own mind his masculinity, even while he knows that by the standards of society around him, he has already broken from it. Number 14. Anne Hathaway auditioned for Brokeback Mountain. In her Princess Diaries. 2 costume. 2 decades after its successful theatrical release, Brokeback Mountain remains a drama remembered in the public mind for several reasons. One of its most unique dramatic elements was shaped by Anne Hathaway's character, the neglected wife, Lureen Newsom. Her path to landing the role was not straightforward, as her audition for the part was not especially promising. In an interview with Variety that reflected on the lasting reputation of Brokeback Mountain, director Ang Lee recalled the awkward circumstances that led to Hathaway's casting. He explained that during the Universal Lot auditions, the casting director warned him that the next actress to enter would likely apologize for her outfit and makeup, but that he should still allow her to proceed with the reading. Anne Hathaway then appeared, wearing heavy makeup and dressed as a princess, as she had been filming a parade scene for the Princess Diaries 2 on the same lot. She used her lunch break from filming to audition for the role. The image of Hathaway arriving at an audition in an ornate outfit from the Princess Diaries 2. Royal engagement carries an ironic weight. Brokeback Mountain told the story of the hidden relationship between cowboys Ennis Del Mar, played by Heath Ledger, and Jack Twist, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. While the film explored the secrecy and inevitable tragedy of their bond, it also portrayed how the seemingly ordinary lives they created with wives and children slowly fell apart. The role Hathaway sought to play was far removed from the bright and fanciful character she appeared as when she entered the audition room. The portrayal of Lureen was one of the quieter tragedies within the film. She first appeared as a determined young woman, confident in her career pursuits and bold in claiming Jack Twist's affection. Over the years, however, the reality of Jack's divided emotions changed her. The audience watched as their marriage evolved into something hollow, leaving her as a hardened, middle-aged woman who reacted with little surprise or emotion to the uncertain details of her husband's death. The knowledge that Hathaway entered the audition room dressed as a princess while seeking this role sharpens the contrast. The anecdote reflects the turn Hathaway's career soon took. Though Lureen was a supporting character, the role displayed emotional depth and captured the decline of a woman who once carried herself with strength. With Hathaway walking into the audition, dressed as the princess most audiences associated her with at the time, the moment seemed to bridge her past as a performer in light comedies with the beginning of her path into serious drama. From that unusual audition came the role that marked a shift in her career, a shift that would eventually lead to her recognition as an Academy Award-winning actress. Number 13. Cultural milestone. As the film reaches its 20th anniversary, its influence on Hollywood and queer storytelling remains profound. It not only brought attention to a romance between men, but it also expanded the boundaries of what could be portrayed on screen, challenged long-standing ideas of masculinity, and opened the way for filmmakers to attempt more truthful stories. The film did not turn to direct political statements. Instead, it placed its audience within the quiet ruin of lives lived partly hidden. Heath Ledger gave a deeply internal performance, and Jake Gyllenhaal balanced it with openness and charm, together forming one of the most memorable pairings in modern cinema. Before Brokeback Mountain, most queer stories appeared only in independent or international films. In Hollywood, gay characters were often limited to stereotypes or supporting roles. Brokeback Mountain altered that. It presented a love story between two men without relying on familiar caricatures, and was embraced as the love story of the year. Its success showed that audiences would respond to queer romance when treated with seriousness and depth. The attention the film received also raised specific questions. Some wondered why the lead roles went to two straight actors. Others felt the story's ending followed the pattern of queer stories ending in loss. But for many LGBTQ viewers, Brokeback Mountain was the first time they saw their lives and desires reflected on screen with weight and care. Part of the film's lasting power stems from its examination of masculinity. Ennis Del Mar was shown as a man unable to release the lessons he had learned about what men should be. His inability to be with Jack was shaped not only by the outside world, but also by the fear and shame he carried within himself. Brokeback Mountain addressed the broader issue of how traditional masculinity often prevents men from expressing their emotions. The impact of that portrayal can be seen in later films, such as Manchester by the Sea and The Power of the Dog, which also explore men's inner lives. Even after 20 years, the moment when Ennis holds Jack's shirt and cries is remembered as one of the most explicit depictions of male vulnerability shown on film. Since the release of Brokeback Mountain, queer cinema has undergone significant shifts. Films such as Call Me by Your Name, Moonlight, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and Blue is the Warmest Color have explored queer love with sensitivity and detail. Television has contributed to this landscape with shows such as Pose, Heartstopper, Looking, and It's a Sin, presenting nuanced, joyful, and poignant portraits of queer life. Number 12. Ledger's romance with Michelle Williams blossomed on set. The film is centered on the relationship between the characters played by Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal. Still, Ledger also shared a clear chemistry on screen with Michelle Williams, who played his wife, Alma. In 2005, during an interview with Time, the film's producer, James Schamus, recalled that the cast and crew watched the two of them fall in love while working on the project. He said that their relationship gave an added spark to the scenes they performed together. Schamus described it as a gift to see two people falling in love during the filming, and noted how easy it was to forget the simple beauty of that moment. Their daughter, Matilda Rose Ledger, was born on October 28, 2005. Michelle Williams and Heath Ledger later separated in September 2007. Unfortunately, Heath died in an apartment in New York City on January 22, 2008, after an accidental overdose that followed months of physical and mental exhaustion. He had reportedly used substances on and off for years, but matters worsened when he was working on several films at the same time, including his last role in The Dark Knight. With very little sleep, he began to rely on different mixes of prescription medicine to quiet his thoughts. In an interview with the New York Times in November, just 2 months before his death at the age of 28, he explained, "I could not stop thinking. My body was exhausted, and my mind was still going." He was later found to have taken a fatal combination of 6 substances, which included 2 narcotics, 2 anti-anxiety medicines, and 2 sleep medicines. Number 11. Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal were required to attend cowboy camp for Brokeback Mountain. The depictions of cowboys are what make Brokeback Mountain a great movie adaptation, and that's thanks to Ledger and Gyllenhaal attending a training ranch called Cowboy Camp. However, having grown up on farms in Western Australia, Ledger required minimal training. Ledger already had all the skills he needed. Lee explained, "He was a natural. He was so good with animals too. When he sat on that horse, there was no doubt in anyone's mind. He was a cowboy." Gyllenhaal, on the other hand, required significantly more training, given his limited experience. Number 10. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were considered to play Brokeback Mountain's male leads. Before Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal were chosen for the lead roles, the production went through many other names. Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Billy Crudup, and Colin Farrell were all considered, along with several others. Mark Wahlberg was also considered, but he turned the script down because he felt it was too sexually explicit. There were rumors that Joaquin Phoenix had been offered a role, but he has stated that no such offer was made, explaining that he would have accepted it if it had been extended to him. Josh Hartnett has spoken with regret about turning down the project, saying that he was supposed to appear alongside Phoenix. Joseph Fiennes was eager to be cast, and went so far as to meet with 3 different directors who were attached to the project during its development process. Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are among the most recognized actors in Hollywood. Their friendship goes back to their childhood years in Cambridge, Massachusetts, when Affleck was 8 and Damon was 10. They remained close through the years, and their connection translated naturally on screen. They worked together on several films, the most celebrated being Good Will Hunting in 1997, which became a turning point in their careers. The possibility of them appearing in Brokeback Mountain together surprised many people. Ben Affleck came close to taking his friendship with Damon into the story when he was lined up for the role of Ennis Del Mar. At that stage, Gus Van Sant was slated to direct, and he planned to have Affleck play Ennis and Damon play Jack Twist. That version of the project did not hold, and eventually Ang Lee took over the direction. Lee chose to cast Heath Ledger as Ennis and Jake Gyllenhaal as Jack. Number 9. Ambiguity of Jack's death. If there was one thing that troubled people about Brokeback Mountain, it was that in the short story, the way Jack died was meant to be uncertain. Ennis immediately thought Jack was murdered as he listened to Lureen's account, shaped by his own fears. Yet later he sometimes questioned which version was the truth. At times he felt convinced he knew what had happened, and at other times he was unsure. He could never know for sure, because he was not with Jack. Each version carried its own weight of tragedy. Annie Proulx wanted that uncertainty to remain in her story, so that every reader could take away their own idea of what happened to Jack, drawn from their own experiences, and also because of Ennis's place in the story. That was central to how she shaped the ending. In the film, however, Ang Lee, with Anne Hathaway's performance, seemed to push one version more strongly than the other. That shift removed some of the openness that had been carefully left in the original text. While it was still possible to see the ending as uncertain, it became more difficult, especially for those who had never read the story. Some viewers may not have realized that the sequence showing Jack's murder existed only in Ennis's mind. That detail mattered, but the way Lee presented the scene, along with Hathaway's delivery, led the audience toward believing Jack was indeed murdered. This created a sharp difference between Lee and Hathaway on one side, and the screenwriters and Proulx on the other. Reports even suggested that Lee wanted the moment to be presented even more forcefully, though he restrained himself. The fact that the image was only in Ennis's thoughts did not mean Jack was not murdered. It simply meant that Ennis could not have known precisely how Jack died, and that what he saw in his mind was only an imagined version. At the same time, that vision did not cancel out the possibility of an accidental death. The point was that the death was meant to remain uncertain. Number 8. Brokeback Mountain crew members, unknowingly used. The same book as a visual reference. Brokeback Mountain presented Wyoming in the 1960s with an accuracy that felt real, and the work on costume and set design followed the same direction with careful attention. Marit Allen, who designed the costumes for the film, turned to a book of photographs by Richard Avedon that captured the American West during the 1950s and 1960s. The images in that book became her guide as she prepared the clothing that would be worn on screen. What made this detail unusual was that several other members of the crew were also using the same book for their own work, even though no one had suggested it to anyone else. They each discovered it separately and relied on it for a sense of how the time and place should look. The shared reference created a unity across the production, even though it was not planned. During the early stages of preparation, the screenwriters had also consulted Avedon's book. Without intending it, their choice aligned with the choices made later by the costume designer and others on the crew. and others. Ultimately, the various elements of the production coalesced into a unified visual foundation, which significantly influenced the way the film portrayed its setting. Number 7. The shirts worn by Brokeback Mountain's lead actors. Sold for more than $100,000. Among the barriers that the success of Brokeback Mountain broke, one that is not really emphasized is the way the film made it acceptable to dress like a cowboy. The clean chambray shirts and worn denim brought back memories of flipping through the pages of an older J. Crew catalog from before the company transitioned to its preppy style. Western clothing reached audiences in a way that led many to spend large amounts of money for what they saw as the authentic look from the film. Some pieces from the cast's wardrobe were given for charity sales and reached prices that few had expected. 2 jackets worn by Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger in the film were sold at a New York event for the Human Rights Campaign on a Saturday. The highest bid was $42,000, placed by Bruce Bastian, who was a board member of the group that supports equal rights for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. That bid was the largest amount paid for any item during that event. Another set of clothing from the film was thought to hold even more meaning. It was the 2 shirts that were connected to the story of the relationship between the main characters. In the film, Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Jack Twist, keeps them as a reminder of the summer he shared with Ennis Del Mar. Later, Heath Ledger's character finds them. A set of those shirts used during filming was placed for sale on eBay to support Variety, the children's charity of Southern California. By the 5th day, bids had already passed $30,000. The shirts included a denim western shirt with a stone-washed finish and snap-flap front pockets, worn by Jack Twist, along with a brushed cotton plaid shirt with diamond snap pockets, worn by Ennis Del Mar. As an example of how much clothing from films can rise in value, John Travolta's white suit from Saturday Night Fever was bought by film critic Gene Siskel in the year 1979 for $2,000. 16 years later, in the year 1995, it sold at Christie's for $145,500. Number 6. Brokeback Mountain saved Ang Lee. From an early retirement, Ang Lee had wanted to direct Brokeback Mountain years before he finally made it. His first attempt to bring it to the screen did not succeed. However, during that time, he went on to direct Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Hulk. Those 2 films left him drained and uncertain about continuing in filmmaking. For a period, he considered walking away from it altogether. In those years, Lee believed Brokeback Mountain had already been made by someone else. He explained that he once asked James Schamus about it, saying he wanted to know how the movie had turned out. Schamus told him it had not yet been made. That moment opened the door for Lee to return to the project. Lee then made the film he had long wanted to make. The experience restored his desire to keep working in cinema, and the film came to be regarded as the one that defined his career. Number 5. Gus Van Sant and Joel Schumacher both wanted to direct Brokeback Mountain. Brokeback Mountain's behind-the-scenes development had drawn the interest of openly gay filmmakers Gus Van Sant and Joel Schumacher, both of whom were interested in directing the cowboy movie. Van Sant instead went on to direct Milk, a biopic about gay rights activist Harvey Milk. Van Sant is known for his dramatic and often harrowing, emotionally exhausting movies, so he would have been just as good a choice as any. Although Schumacher is now famous for his lackluster Batman movies, he has an overlooked filmography that proves he would have done a great job as well. Number 4. Ang Lee faced constant difficulties with Brokeback Mountain's sheep. Emma Thompson recalled in the published screenplay for Sense and Sensibility that Lee had difficulties with sheep on the set and vowed never to work with animals again. However, Brokeback Mountain is about 2 men who meet while herding sheep. Lee might have benefited from sticking to his promise as he faced constant problems with sheep on Brokeback Mountain behind the scenes. Sheep don't drink from running water sources, only from ponds and lakes, so Lee spent a whole day trying to get the sheep to drink from a stream. There was also a risk that the animals would spread diseases, as American sheep were mixed with Canadian sheep. Number 3. And Gyllenhaal's second thought, after his colleague's death, Jake. Gyllenhaal spoke openly about the loss of Heath Ledger, recalling how their time together on Brokeback Mountain had a profound impact on him in a very personal way. He said the grief was not only for a close friend, but also for an actor whose talent had given significant meaning to the story they shared. He recalled how a sense of family grew among the cast and crew during filming, a bond that mirrored the themes of love and closeness shown on screen. That experience stayed with him and shaped his perspective on what mattered most in life. For Gyllenhaal, the film became a reminder to value genuine relationships and to choose work that holds real meaning, rather than getting caught up in things without depth. Ledger's passing, which came far too early, also reminded him of the promise that was left unfinished. Speaking about him, Gyllenhaal honored both his friend and the lasting impact Brokeback Mountain has as a work that continues to move people through its honesty and artistry. Number 2. It was a career risk for Foth leading actors. Although Brokeback Mountain's acclaim would lead to both Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger securing Oscar nominations, that wasn't the expected result when the actors signed on to the project. In fact, Gyllenhaal recalled his industry peers being baffled that he would take the risk of playing a gay character. In a quote obtained by Business Insider, he said, "Part of the medicine of storytelling is that we were two straight guys playing these parts. There was a stigma about playing a part like that, you know? Why would you do that? And I think it was imperative to both of us to break that stigma." Number 1. It took 8 years to make Brokeback Mountain. Speaking to The Hollywood Reporter, Diana Ossana explained how arduous the process was of getting her script for Brokeback Mountain made into an actual movie. From the sounds of it, the most challenging part was finding lead actors and a director who was willing to commit to the project. She described the pre-production process as featuring a seemingly revolving door of prominent young actors getting involved with the project, only to drop out soon after. She faced similar struggles finding a director, as the script was sent to Edward Norton, Gus Van Sant, and Joel Schumacher before Ang Lee signed on. In Ossana's words, they all came back saying they loved it, but no one would commit. They didn't give us any real excuse why they wouldn't. I guess they saw it as too difficult. Outro controversial at the time yet beloved in retrospect, Brokeback Mountain is now remembered as a landmark moment in modern cinema. Which fact surprised you? Let's hear from you in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and enable notifications for future videos from us.